to the maximum extent practicable, and those are things that are included in existing rule language and things along those lines. So it's a little difficult to just be absolute. Let me just make a comment, though, is if the decision by the task force is to take out those qualifying language, I think it needs to come out of the definitions too. For example, when we were discussing the avoid, minimize, mitigate, and enhance definitions, avoid, minimize, mitigate, and enhance, they have some language in it as well. So it would be the definitions, not just the guiding principles. Could I take one more minute and just kind of bring up a couple points that I was unable to provide this morning?
Sure, since you had technical difficulties.
And I apologize for the rest of the task force and the DOT for doing this. On the one high-level need, it talks about protect, connect, enhance environmentally sensitive areas, natural resources, ecosystems. I think we left out of there conservation lands, and I think the intent was to cover that, but I think it would be good to specifically talk about conservation lands in that higher-level need. And then I had a few other points I was going to bring up this morning, but I will forego those. But I do have one question that I was unable to. Perhaps it was covered this morning. What is I understand the hierarchy of the higher level needs, then you're getting more specific of the how when it comes to the guiding principles, and then the what's next for the instructions. But are the instructions or future discussion any more important, less important than the guiding principles? And I was just wanting to know that, because as we're getting into in none of the higher level needs, there was no discussion about our monitoring sites, and really it's really not included very much in the guiding principles, and it goes into some of the future discussion based on what I was looking at earlier. And I want to make sure that it is, if there's something in a future discussion or instructions, that is just as important as any other portion, whether it's the higher level need or the guiding principles.
So Beth? Okay. Instructions actually are put there to provide instructions for FDOT as they're going through the PD&E process and beyond. So the difference is the instructions, and I see wayways popping in, but the instructions provide more specificity, whereas the guiding principles are overarching and can also be applied to new information that comes forward. But Wayway, please.
Beth, you said it better than I could. There's no difference in their importance. It's just the more, as we drill down from high-level need to guiding principles to instructions, we provide more and more specificity and details.
Okay, wants to weigh in?
Yeah, I was sorry about that. I was trying to get my mask off my ear. Brian, I think if you're specifically talking about the monitoring sites, that would be a good item to include in the instructions portion, because that's where the directions to the department is going to be provided for our project development and planning sites. Okay.
Yes, and also, Brian, you'll see that encapsulated when you look at the worksheet for the high-level needs. You'll see that that statement and commitment in there to address that as an instruction. We listen to you. We're very mindful of that priority. So based on the discussion we had and the back and forth on the maximum extent possible, I'm going to, in my reading of the task force, is that we'll leave that in here. Is that if anyone is now not comfortable with that? We have Shannon, okay, and Andrew. So the two that just raised their hands, they would like to have the maximum extent fees possible removed. Let me ask Jason Height. He came in. Jason. Jason, we lost you there. We'll keep moving. Andrew Dickman.
Yes. I mean, to me, I think we need to be very specific. Obviously, the PD&E is a law, and you have to follow it. And I think the goal of the task force is to give very specific directions. And I feel like these types of qualifying language is far too broad and gives way more latitude, and essentially doesn't mesh with why we would even have a task force and meetings to discuss this. So I'm for taking out those qualifying terms.
Okay, and I know Wei talked about bringing this back based on feedback from the other task forces. Would it be acceptable to the other two if we just bring this back based on what was heard and that she explained earlier? You can put down your hands if you would agree to allow that specificity to some way of coming back in the next round. I'm looking to move this forward. And then we did also want to hear from local governments since this affects them. So people still have their hands raised. I'm going to go to Jason Height. He was in there first, and then Bill McDaniel. Jason?
Yes, this is Jason Height with FWC. I did lower my hand. I don't know what's going on with the lag, but just to reiterate other people's language, other people's comments, is if, you can get granular all day long. If it's in the statutes and if it's in rules and if it's in PD&E, I don't know if we have to reiterate that every time in every principle.
Okay, thank you. So I think we're hearing to make it more granular. Bill McDaniel, and then Shannon, and then we'll move on. Bill?
Yeah, and I just want to share this. In my worldly travels and dealing with government, I perceive these guiding principles to be global. They need to be as flexible for all of the people that we're talking to, and absolutely the opposite of what Andrew just got done saying as far as being granular. I think the guiding principles need to be a global premise and allow for flexibility and not the specificity. The specificity, we all know, is going to come in the next set with the instructions and then ultimately into the PD&E when we get into the actual granular level that is requisite for the individual communities that are coming along. So I'm gonna hold on where I'm at and don't concur with that thought process, only to the extent that it has been mentioned that it is duplicative. And if we're saying the same thing over and it's already covered somewhere else and we're okay, then I'll be fine with it. But I just want to make sure we're providing for as much flexibility for all of the communities and all of the locales that this potential corridor is going to touch.
Wei, did you want to respond?
What I synthesized from the discussion so far is that we want to have the appropriate level of specificity in these guiding principles. So I ask you if you could give staff some flexibility in combing through these guiding principles again, take a look at them in light of these comments and bring you back another draft. And we'll make sure that we retain the flexibility in there for DOT to collaborate with the locals, but also make sure that these guiding principles do say what they intend to say, and where not required, we'll get rid of the qualifying phrases. So please be patient with us and let us bring you back another draft to react to.
Okay, perhaps we can add a note to the draft guiding principle, or do we have more discussion? Okay.
No, I was gonna. We do have two new voices that wanted to weigh in,
okay.
And then we'll add a note to the guiding principle. So Katie Worthington Decker, and then Penny Taylor, and then we will move on. Okay. So Katie.
Yes, and kind of trying to follow along as much as I can. I guess this question is for FDOT staff. Do you agree that it's unneeded because it's in the statute? I mean, from your experience, do you agree that it's unneeded because it's in the statute? Kind of looking for your opinion on this too.
Well, this is your guiding principle. We're supporting your discussions, but based on the discussions from the other two task forces, members agreed to remove these qualifying phrases as much as we can.
Because they're covered in statute, right, Wei Wei?
Right. The statute offers us the flexibility and allows the collaboration to go on.
Okay. And then Penny, and then we'll wrap it up.
Thank you. I hope the rain is pouring on my tin roof here, so I hope it doesn't drown out and become interfering with what I want to say. Just briefly, as a representative of a county, I would appreciate this task force being consistent with statewide, regional, and local plans and visions. I would not appreciate the loophole that says to the maximum extent possible from the task force recommendations, understanding that the statute governs them. So what I'm saying is, from a very personal point of view, to know that this task force is asking this road to be consistent with the plans of my county without any loopholes written in, gives me a lot of peace. So I would prefer the qualifiers to be removed. Thank you.
Commissioner, this is Wei Wei. The qualifying language was not put in there intended as a loophole. It was intended for us to have the flexibility, because sometimes, like your comp plans, they may change in time, so we can work together. But I think if it's the sentiment of the task force to remove these qualifying languages, being more direct with these guiding principles, that's not an issue.
Fine. And again, if not to belabor it, and I respect that, and this wasn't a criticism, I'm becoming very parochial looking at it, saying, this task force tells me that they're going to do this to the maximum extent possible. Well, they don't know my plan. This is my county's plan. They need to abide by it. Who are they? You know, that kind of dialogue, when you remove those qualifiers, it calms things out, and then you're covered by the statutes to the maximum extent possible. So, thank you.
So Penny, that's great. Exactly what we were hoping to hear from the local and regional agencies that this relates to and would report to. So with that, we can move on to the next guiding principle. But what we'll do is, Brandy, for a note, just put in underneath it that we need to revisit. We look to take that out and revisit how to make flexible as well as not look like it's a loophole. So that helped me with the language.
Sure. Revisit the
revisit the qualifying language.
The qualifying language relative to. It's just a note. So
I think it's fine as is.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
We know the intent and the discussion. Okay. So are we ready to move on?
Right,
next guiding principle.
And just keep in mind, we will see these again next time.
Great. So the subject of maximizing the use of existing facilities has come up frequently in your discussions and past meetings. This is the second large cross-cutting principle that is considered when addressing all of your high-level needs that you put forward. This slide is just a reminder of examples that you've seen before. We've heard many comments related to the use of existing regional roadway networks, as well as co-location opportunities within and adjacent to existing right-of-way. So let's go ahead and move forward and look at the guiding principle language. So this is actually the first of a few guiding principles that have a proposed priority order. The ordering is based on clarification questions asked by some of you in prior meetings. So I'll review the language just in case you need a moment to digest it. Evaluate potential statewide and interregional corridor improvements in this priority order. 1, make safety and operational improvements to existing transportation facilities. 2, add capacity to existing transportation facilities, including co-location of facilities within existing disturbed right-of-way and other approaches to transforming existing facilities and right-of-way to accommodate additional modes, uses, and functions. 3, where necessary to address statewide and interregional mobility or connectivity needs, develop new transportation facilities. So let's now hear from you on whether this language resonates with you.
Yeah, and Beth, I was thinking this might be one where some of our NPO partners might be more interested in weighing in because of their transportation planning expertise. But we do have 2 people that have their hands up, Katie Worthington-Decker and then Shannon Estinos. So Katie?
Yes, so 2 points and then 1 question. One, just kind of the last point. I sit on several projects with FDOT right now, and you take in the local community's considerations very seriously, and we certainly appreciate that and the collaborative relationship with that. The other is just a red pen typo on the 4th bullet point down in the instructions for project development. Instead of assess, it's another word there that you just might want to correct there on public.
Yes, I just noticed that myself at lunchtime.
Oh, there you go. So that's just the little English teacher in me coming out on that one.
Typo, thank you for recognizing that.
You're welcome. But one serious question. So on number 2, the add capacity to existing transportation facilities, including co-location, my question on that is, this may be included in the spirit of it, but I'm wondering if it needs to be more explicit on where does the expansion of existing right-of-way fit into that. And just wanting to make sure that we can expand if needed to address capacity and safety issues in that statement, and if that statement allows for that, or if it does need to be more explicit.
So the language refers to adding capacity.
So the section talks about,
included in that as long as it's existing disturbed right-of-way. I'm also looking at LK to see if he's going to nod his head or not. That's a yes.
I'm sorry, Beth, that's a yes, that it is included in that definition there?
Yes, because it's part of adding capacity to an existing right-of-way.
Okay.
It could be that, put it to you that way.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted that clarification.
And keep in mind, too, more specificity could be in the draft instructions when you get to those.
Okay.
What else?
We have Shannon, and then Pat Steed. Shannon?
Yes, thanks. A question and then a comment or a suggestion. Beth, I might be having a senior moment, and if I am, I apologize. But did you answer my question about paths and courses? The Secretary said this morning that in August we would be brought back paths and courses. What are paths and courses?
Can I do that?
Sure.
Hey, Shannon, I think the way we responded to your question is Will was going to cover that aspect.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. Senior moment. Told you. I was having a senior moment. Okay. All right, thanks. And then here's my actual relevant comment, which is, so the way I'm looking at the maximized use of existing facilities, and I've brought this up over the last several meetings, in terms of, I think our comment for the foundation has been prioritize existing corridors. So what we had hoped to see was something more like, your first priority is to try to meet all needs and benefits within existing corridors. Sort of priority number 1. And then if and only if that can't be done through co-location or expansion or the toolbox that you have under MCORs, if that can't be done, then you evaluate new corridors. But your first priority is to look at existing corridors for meeting benefits and needs.
Go ahead, Wei Wei.
Hey, Shannon, that's exactly what we're trying to do. Maybe the language is not clear. We can revise to make sure it's explicit. We want to evaluate potential improvements in this priority order. So first is make safety and operational improvements. And the second is add capacity or improve existing. And then the third step is to, after these first two steps have been considered, then we, where it's necessary, we'll address statewide and interregional mobility and other needs through the development of new transportation facilities. So that's exactly what we're trying to convey. But if the language is not clear, we need to modify.
Yeah. So I think you've got the structure. I think it's a structure issue. I think that if that's the case, I think the first, it would have to be a little bit restructured. So what I think you would say is meet for that top bullet where you say evaluate potential statewide and interregional corridor improvements. You could leave it there and say in this priority order, and then the first should be a general statement that says, meeting all needs and benefits within existing corridors, and then, by making safety and operational improvements, by adding capacity, and so on. And then the second would be, if that's not, if that doesn't work, then you evaluate new corridors. You get my meaning? I think right now what you've got is you've got sort of prescriptive 1 and 2, where really what you're trying to say is you look at existing corridors first, and here are the things you can do. You can improve operation, you can improve safety, you can expand them, you can co-locate facilities, but it's all within existing corridors.
Yeah, I think I get what you're trying to say. Instead of listing these bullets, you want the description of the priority order. We look at existing facilities first. And then I think from the other groups discussed to drop where necessary and reword the third bullet to make it more clear. It's, we'll consider improving existing first. So that's something.
Yes, exactly. I think the language, I think this can just be reordered, but if what you're trying to do is prioritize, you look at existing corridors first, I do think this needs some work. And sounds like you got some feedback from the other two task forces on this point as well.
Yep. So Karen and Beth, if you we got what Shannon was suggesting. So if you guys can engage the other members and see if we have any other feedback, what else about this one?
Okay, we do have some more. So Pat Steed was up next, and then Gary Ritter and Bill McDaniel. So Pat?
Hi. My perspective is going to be a little bit different, and I want to put on not so much my Central Florida Regional Planning Council hat as my Heartland Regional Transportation Planning Organization, in other words, the MPO view of this. One of the concerns I have about it is that number 2 is too specific and in fact may run into conflicts as we go forward, because every existing corridor, assuming this is some significant corridor, that's included in our MPO plans, and every county in our study area is in an MPO, so this affects everybody. We now have to look at measures and targets because that's a federal requirement. The state has to look at those. We have to look at those. They have to be in plans. We have to have consistency. We have to, there's a whole other set of things that enter into how we have to do transportation planning, programming, funding, etc. That really, and as we look at existing corridors, we have to have our own criteria as we go through setting priorities and other things. So I think that I understand the direction of what Shannon just said and what Weiwei said, that addressing this from overall the priority of looking at them. But I think number 2 is too specific for a guiding principle and could be in conflict with certain decision making that has to be made by MPOs.
Hey, Pat.
Oh, go ahead. Wait.
Sorry. Pat, thank you for your comment. I think based on what you and Shannon provided, I think we need to reword 1 and 2 and maybe combine those, be a little bit more higher level in this case, and then remove the where necessary in the third bullet.
Pat, does that satisfy your concern?
Yes, I think a relook at this would be appropriate. And I think that y'all can incorporate these other things within that and just making some of that more detail go to instructions, which is a lot better place, I think, to put that.
Okay. All right. Yes, Bill McDaniel?
Yes, I concur with what Pat had to say. That's kind of sort of what I was going to say. It gets a little convoluted if you jump from the heading, which is maximizing use of existing facilities. That's the goal. I think that's a consensus item that the task force has seen. If we're going to build the road, and I think our colleague Paul said that early on, if we're going to build a road, we need to utilize to the maximum extent possible existing facilities and right-of-ways and such. So I think that's in the consensus number. And I was going to suggest we do get into the weeds a little bit there on 2 and 3. I think number 1 needs to stay where it is because it is the department, both the state and federal departments, Northern Star, if you will, that safety is out there and is in fact paramount. And just so Shannon doesn't have her feelings hurt, I do also agree with her that we need to tighten up on the lunch breaks, and 30 minutes on these virtual meetings is more than enough. Just 'cause I'm not always disagreeing with her.
Okay.
Well, and just to follow up to what you said, the 1 and 2 breakout, I think what you were suggesting is it's really a priority within a priority. So within the use of existing facilities, this layout makes safety and operational improvements a priority within that, and then capacity the next priority.
So, Shannon, I see you raised your hand. Are you wanting to weigh in on this, or you have a different question?
Yeah, I just want to make it clear that I agree with both Pat and Bill on this. I think there is too much detail there. I was making a bigger point, about the structure of the guiding principle. So I'm perfectly comfortable with staff trying to meld the feedback you're getting here.
Okay.
It doesn't mean we disagree. And thank you, Bill, for the lunch support. I appreciate that.
Then Gary Ritter, you've been waiting. Do you have some comments on that?
Yeah, I really don't have any specific comments on what we have down there, but just an observation. But before I make that observation, I will concur with Bill and Shannon that 30 minutes is enough for lunch. At any rate, one of the things, observation-wise, that I see the importance in, utilizing existing facilities and improving existing facilities, and we've talked about, agricultural lands and concerned about fragmenting agricultural lands, and utilizing existing transportation corridors can minimize the fragmentation of agricultural land. So I think this one, is extremely important. And I don't know if it was Bill that had said that he had gone across country on the bicycle, and initially before we went to the break, somebody was talking about that and how, the existing corridors would, kind of hurts rural communities. But I can tell you, when you make those enhancements to existing facilities, they have actually shown to improve economic viability in communities. And one example is Okeechobee with the widening of State Road 70 from Fort Pierce over to Okeechobee. That certainly has improved commerce in that situation. And in Little Yeehaw Junction, when you've improved Highway 60, there's another example how that area has grown a bit, and it even has a stoplight now rather than a flashing red and yellow. So that's progress. But just a couple of observations of the importance of this on rural communities and in our agricultural farmlands as well.
So Gary, on that comment, a couple things. This particular guiding principle is overarching and tending to cut across all needs. Some of the language you're talking about could also be included in instructions, and what you're going to see when we get a little bit farther ahead, and the economic development guiding principle and the agricultural land use guiding principle, there may be some opportunities there too for instruction.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
So as we close this one out, Brandy, I think we need to say revisit the language regarding combining 1 and 2, or maybe just say revisit the language regarding specificity and prioritization. And that'll be sufficient. You can go back and pull up the. LK, you want to weigh in before we do that?
Yeah, Karen, I thought the overwhelming feedback that I heard was this guiding principle was too specific and would need to be at a higher level. Kind of, what the intent of the guiding principle was, right? So let's make sure that language is reflected.
I meant to make that less specific than more specific.
Yes. Can I try one more time?
Yes, go ahead.
Let's try this. On the note, combining 1 and 2, and the language used for 2 to make that less specific than what it is. And also the removal of the qualifying language in number 3. How did we do, task force members?
Anybody disagree with just the documentation? No, we're good to go.
Okay.
Of course, they didn't give you much time, but no.
Well, thank you all for the great discussion. So next we have a grouping of 3 topic areas: social and community context, economic development, and agricultural land uses. So we're going to talk about those next 3 in succession. Because of the discussion relative to agriculture and agricultural lands related to economic development, it seems good to have that as part of that discussion. It also makes for a nice segue, because after we get through this group of 3, we're going to go into our environmental resources and wildlife grouping. So it's a good segue and a bridge into that. So let's start with this one, social and community context. As we heard again today, earlier this morning with the needs discussion, and we also heard it as we entered into the guiding principle discussion, the desire to maintain the identity of communities within the region has been a recurring theme here and in past meetings. So examples here could be anything from maintaining rural main streets to landscape designs for the corridor to trailheads used for recreational purposes. In the GIS tool, there's actually a task force member requested avoidance area called existing trails that you've been reviewing. As mentioned by many of you, this could also be considered an opportunity for enhancement or an attraction area. So let's go dive into the language of the draft guiding principle. Maintain and enhance community character and quality of life consistent with local and regional visions and plans. This guiding principle actually serves, as you can see, several of the high-level needs that you identified. So let's enter into discussion and hear your thoughts about this.
So are there any comments, concerns? Do we hit this on the mark? And then this in particular for those rural communities and areas that the folks want to, that this reflects the most, want to weigh in? Just a coal and landlord or others. Pat, Steve wants to weigh in. Pat?
I'd just like to say that I think that is very consistent with the Heartland 2060 visioning and a whole bunch of different things that are brought together within that. So both the guiding principle and also the instructions that go with that guiding principle.
All right. Shannon Estenos again?
Yeah, I just want to make an encouraging comment that I think this is tremendously important. I think it sounds right. The guiding principle language sounds reasonable and right. As long as the folks who represent local government on our task force are comfortable with the fact that visions and plans, that's where this, those are the keepers of community character and quality of life visions. I think this is really an important guiding principle.
Thanks, Shannon. So I see Penny weighing in as a local government. Maybe Penny, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I would agree. I'm very comfortable with this. It's very short and direct, and it's very clearly written. So I'm very comfortable with the way it's reading. Thank you.
Okay, and Angela Falconetti?
Yes. Can you hear me okay, Karen? Okay, great. Just want to make sure. I just want to add, this is the one that, of all of them, that I have paid the closest attention to, quite frankly, throughout my work with the task force, which has been economic development, primarily related to my role as the president of Polk State College. And I don't think there's anything that we've missed here. I think it's pretty comprehensive. It's global enough, yet it provides enough detail. So I just wanted to give you my personal endorsement.
Thank you. All right. With that, I'm going to give task force members one last chance to raise your hand if you have any concerns for right now. Like I said, you'll come back next time. I am not seeing any, so we'll move forward with that. Okay, great. All right, so next, you'll see examples of attraction areas that you've seen before that relate to our next topic, economic development. There are several other related attraction areas that you've reviewed that include things such as medical facility locations and access to healthy food sources. So let's look at the draft guiding principle language now. Okay, so this is based on your input. Advance economic development, job creation, and community development with emphasis on rural areas of most need. Again, this is another one that serves a number of the high-level needs that you've identified. So let us know now your thoughts about the language here. So I see Eric Anderson who's speaking up on this one. Eric?
Yes, ma'am. I just looking at this one, I know in economic development, one of the big things that we look at is business retention and expansion. So I